Former British Labour MP Lord Peter Hain says state capture and corruption can't only be aligned with government and public officials, but also with the private sector. The former anti-apartheid campaigner told the Zondo Commission that he found it strange that those in authority in South Africa hadn't seen the warning signs of state capture, yet it was all over the media. The British MP has described the collapsed Estina dairy farm project as one of the examples of organised robbery by the controversial Gupta family. We're joined now by Wayne Duvenage from Organisation Against Tax Abuse. He joins us via Skype. Wayne, a very good evening to you. Thank you so much for speaking to us. What is the value of this testimony? As in, are these revelations new?
It's very good testimony. I think Peter Hain has covered quite a wide range of what the issues are. But I think more importantly, it's very important that we start highlighting and focusing on other institutions and the private sector, as he points out, the banks particularly, and not only the international banks, where we see Bank of Baroda, HSBC and Standard Chartered, but also our local banks. You know, our local banks did act, but they acted very, very late. Money laundering and the type of conduct that was going on in South Africa, in the local banks here, had been going on for some time, and the flags were very clearly there before they started taking action. And thank goodness they took action, but it was too little and far too late.
And I mean, we'll talk about the nature of state capture in just a moment, but let's just start with some of the testimony that he gave. So would you agree with him that the Estina Dairy Farms project was one of the clearest examples of organised robbery from some of the poorest people in South Africa?
Absolutely. Much bigger interventions, though, have happened with Transnet, with the 1064 locomotives, where the price was up from about 34 to 50 billion rand. Extra money was paid, which had never been paid, to China and North and South Rail. That money was laundered into accounts, into billions of rands, by the way, into many smaller accounts in Hong Kong. We've done an extensive amount of research there. We'll be laying charges and complaints in England with the Bank of England about conduct that has happened there against an international bank. And it's so obvious it has happened, and yet the bankers continue to conduct allowing these transactions to happen as if nothing's wrong. And yet they have been warned, they have been fined billions of dollars of fines over a number of years, but no one is held accountable. We need to see accountability now.
But in terms of the Gupta leaks and obviously some of the information that's been coming out, is it apparent how government funds were leaving South Africa to a company owned by the Guptas?
Yes, very clear. There's no hiding that. There's substantive evidence, and I mean we're working on a lot of this stuff. I think the National Prosecuting Authority, the state, the Special Investigations Unit, Asset Forfeiture Unit. There are a number of institutions working on this. There's ample information of how much money left this country unlawfully, laundered through the banks, because it's the banks that enable and transfer the funds. And if they had have watched the warning signs, they would have picked it up very long time ago, which they did.
As you say that the banks were complicit in it, but it's also about the payment structure. Have they provided, just in terms of, from what we know in the past, the role of Standard Chartered Bank in hiding all of this?
Yeah, and Bank of Baroda as well. I mean, a number of loans and property purchases in this country where the real values, and it wasn't going to take a lot of investigation by the banks to see exactly that when the Guptas buy property here and then revalue them and get additional loans from the Bank of Baroda for 5 to 10 times the value of that property from its last transaction. These are very simple tests, litmus tests that they need to do in order to uncover wrongdoing, and yet very little, if anything, was done on many of those. And the banks earn a lot of money through these transactions. So one gets the impression that they turn a blind eye, they look away, because otherwise, the case of if they don't do it, some other bank is going to do it, and the other bankers will get rich.
So the banks themselves are denying that they did not make any attempt to assist in tracking the money and identify where it went. In fact, that they claim that they've been working with local regulators, including in the United Arab Emirates. Would you agree with this?
Well, we would say that maybe they are now, but again, too little too late. They should have stopped billions of rands from flowing from this country in the first place. Have all the systems, the processes to pick up the money laundering, the amounts of money that were being transacted on a daily basis, money in, money out, multiple accounts. It's as clear as evidence to us when we have a look at this. And then when we look in Hong Kong with an international bank, again, the same thing. Shelf companies are purchased, but no trading. Suddenly millions of rands found their way into those bank accounts. And then within a few days, that millions of rands or dollars, in this case, flow straight out of those bank accounts. There are flags that banking systems have for this type of behavior. Why were they not doing anything then when they should have? It's all very well to come out after the fact and say, yes, no, we're going to help and we're going to be participating in uncovering the problem. They should have done this a long time.
I mean, Peter, you mentioned earlier on about state capture, and there's been a lot of literature on this, about how pernicious it is. So it filters down to every man on the street, in the system. So it almost seems like old threats, new packaging. Surely we should have known that this is the nature of state capture and why we'd be in this place where we are, where the Guptas were able to use 30 million rand stolen from government money from the Estina dairy farm to end up paying for a wedding in Sun City in 2013.
Yeah, no, very clear. And as you say, the most unfortunate thing is it's the poorest of the poor that get hit the hardest with money that is lost to this country. There was an example in Estina of local farmers that were going to have their lives set up with them. The plan was great. They got very excited. Some of them had gone the lengths of changing their lifestyle, getting ready for this transaction, only to be let down. And I think, it's absolutely disgusting how our local government and our government in the province of Free State allowed this to happen. And these people that were part of these transactions continue to walk the streets as if nothing has happened. They're not answering the questions. We need to hold all these transgressors to account. I think that time will come. It's just taking a lot longer than what we would like. But state capture is very important. State capture is now permeated right down into local government, where you have capture of municipalities, same modus operandi, running roughshod over procurement processes. It's dire consequences. These multiple billions of rands, as we saw the Auditor General talking about, $1 billion rands in consultant fees. I mean, it's just ludicrous what's happening.
If that is the case, that means you and I, as supposedly active citizens, should also be held to account for the wide-scale corruption that is taking place. I mean, if the U.S. has enacted a law to ensure that the three brothers and Salim Issa are blocked from doing any transactions with any U.S. businesses or interests, that should be something that should have been done from the South African point of view, from other countries who've had dealings with them before.
Yes, absolutely. And now we're seeing actions starting to take place. I mean, why do we have to wait for a country like the United States to start taking action? Why do we have to wait for Lord Peter Hain to start putting pressure on the British government to start taking action against companies that are registered in the Gupta's names? We should be taking action from South Africa's point of view a lot, sooner than what we have. We should have been beating down the doors of the United Arab Emirates, the Indian authorities, the Hong Kong authorities to repatriate our funds and the transgressors, the Guptas themselves. Salim Issa was a kingpin in this whole process. But there are a number of names that are extremely intricate and woven into the money that is left in this country. Nothing seems to be happening, and our government needs to do a lot, and us as citizens need to be putting them under a lot of pressure to act.
And the fines that come with the blacklisting, are they enough of a deterrent to stop anybody trying to do business with them?
I don't think so. It's not a matter of fines not being enough. I think that's one of the deterrents. We need to look at it holistically. What we need is action taken against individuals. We would like to see jail time. The biggest deterrent to corruption and money laundering is not just the fines. And we see this with the banks as well. I think there's one senior bank official internationally that's been held accountable, yet 250 billion rand dollars worth of fines have been paid by the banks over the number of decades now. And yet no senior official in the banking institutions have spent time behind bars, or certainly not at the level to the extent that we would hope to see. The same thing should happen here. So jail time, it's fines, it's repatriation of funds, combination of all of that starts to become the deterrent. Not enough is in that regard.
Thank you very much for your time. Wayne Duvenage from the Organisation Against Tax Abuse. Aldrin?